I think of, my family is we are functionally dramatic. And so whenever we go somewhere on vacation, just like a family outing, there's always drama, right? There's something that happens, but it makes the trip so much more fun.
Memories.
Because, I mean, if you know anything about me, I'm meticulous in my travel plans. Like everything is perfect. But then once I bring my family in the mix, no one knows what's going to happen.
Hey baby, whoa. Can I tell you what's on my mind? 'Cause I've been thinking
Welcome
about it for
everyone to
quite
Coaching in
some
Session. This is good to
time.
be another special edition with our Group 7 coming in, and then also another special day, episode 600 of the podcast. We have come such a long way from episode 1, from everything that I've learned from just doing a podcast, from being a podcast host, to having so many amazing guests that have been able to come on and bless us with their wisdom and their knowledge. And today is going to be no different. And if you are familiar with the guest episodes are from previous guests that have been on the podcast that have been an integral part of what coaching in session is, and just bringing about so much wisdom and so much hope for individuals from their perspective topics and their works. They have made a difference in the world. And so today we're going to be creating a collab of so many great minds, and we're going to be talking about the idea of family and community. So without further ado, let me bring in the guests right now so we can introduce everyone. We're going to start off with Renes. If you could, please tell us who you are, what you do, and of course, how you help people.
My name is Renes Lophanor. I am a teacher. I teach languages, more than four languages, so English, literature, French, Spanish. And I've been teaching for 26 years. I'm also father of two and musician. And so for me, the word family means a lot and probably different things to other people, but I'm sure we're going to meet up at some point in our definition of what family is.
Perfect. And then let's go straight to Terrence.
Yes, sir. How are you guys doing? Terence Chatmon. I'm the founder of Victorious Family. We basically equip parents, empower them so that their family can flourish. And so we've been in operation for about 16 plus years. We're in currently about 39 countries, 43 states, trained about 100,000 parents. Our passion is to see families flourishing and understanding how to integrate their faith at home. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on. An expert in family. It's going to be so good. And then Michael, if you could.
Thanks for having me, Michael. Michael T. Brown, and I'm a therapist, licensed counselor. I see individuals, families, couples here in the Washington, D.C. area, and I do consulting and counseling across the country, and yeah, with businesses and individuals. And glad to be on the show. Look forward to discussing this topic.
Excellent. And if you can just look at all of the jobs, we have an educator, we have someone who's not only in family helping people, but with the aspect of the spirit and belief. And then we have the maybe not the right term would be the medical side, right? The therapist side, looking at the mind and what can go wrong. And I know all of these are going to bring up like about a different thing or meaning for what family is. And so we can define family by many different things. Family can be blood. It could be people you have developed a deeper connection to. Community can be just the people that you are associated with. It could be your classmates. It could be maybe your following on social media. But if we really had to define the difference between family and community, what would that be? And so we're going to go with Renes again, starting you off. The difference between family and community.
Families today come in so many different forms. We have the nuclear families, single parents, chosen families, um, and so on. So, with regard to community, a community is there isn't we can say there isn't so much difference between the two, um, because of the fact that we need both of them to live, to feel whole, and I would, if I may quote what Jean-Paul Sartre said, that we need the other to feel that we exist. So our families, I would say, is more than just our biological family, so parents, brothers, sisters. Nowadays, these ones are those that we did not choose, but that we don't have to call our only family. I believe in the power or the need to make decision once you've grown, and to choose what you feel is good for you. And all that, by saying all that, I'm not saying to deny your one's biological family, because for me, my biological family means a lot to me. And I've got 6 siblings. I'm the eldest, and we are that connected, really very close to each other, and laughing with each other every day in our WhatsApp group. Community wise, I am living in a city where I'm involved in many things, especially the music scene. It's a different vibe, but I can say that if I really need help with something serious, the family is what's gonna stand first to help. To me, that's what I would put still out first as the top priority in between the two. If I were to choose, there's no no doubt that the family would come first.
Yeah, I'm going to take it from the biological family, right? So we all have a mother and father. Whether we know them or not, we have a mother and father. We have siblings, and then we have an extended family. When I think about lineage, it's important to understand our lineage. Even if you come from a biblical standpoint, you look at Matthew, you look at other things, he looks at the lineage. And that's an important thing, especially when you look back into history. Your lineage has impacted your life one way or the other. And so I start there. Of course, we have caregivers, who may not be our biological parents or family, but yet we have been adopted or drafted into that family. So that's part of family. Whoever is providing for caregivers. In fact, we have a large number of young people being raised by their grandparents. And, without them, we wouldn't have the support, that we need. Of course, there's step parents and things of that nature. I think Warren Buffett said something very well. He said, what's important when you think about family or just loved ones in general, is at the end of the day, when you think about your life and reflect on it, for those that you loved, do they love you in return? He called that a successful life. And so another part of family that I think about are those that have been put in my life to walk with and to love and to care for and so forth. That's part of family as well. That could be a community that I put that in a community category or family community where I have been given a special privilege and honor to walk alongside with people in my community, whether it may be. When we were growing up in Chicago, Illinois, and I'm sure across the country, we didn't have, we had several parents. We had Sister Sue down the street. We had all these people. I mean, by the time the news hit school, by the time you get home, everybody in the community knew about it. We didn't have neighborhood watchers. We didn't need them. We already had them built in. But they were allowed to hold you accountable. They were allowed to speak into your life. You went down the street to get advice and get wisdom. And everyone in that community, we said it takes a community, it takes a tribe to really raise a child. And so I know I experienced that, and I'm sure you guys did as well. that many people invested in us, many people served us, many people loved us, cared for us. And so, but when I think about family, I really want to emphasize that there is a great need for our parents to invest in our life, especially the dads. I want the dads to know that there's never a time in a child's life that they don't crave your love. They crave the love of the father. And for those who miss that father love, they kind of get it from mom, they get that automatic. But those that miss that father's love, they crave it. And for those who didn't have it, they crave it and they try to replace it with something or someone else. It's the father's love is so critical, especially for a young man, but also for a young woman, because there's never a time in a child's life that they don't crave that love and affection from the father. The mother just kind of gets it, right? She just fits it in. So I do want to emphasize the great need for family, the great need for fatherhood, especially. And I want us to know that families become fragmented when it's missing the core components of it, when it's missing a mother, when it's missing a father, when it's missing key pieces to it. Young people, kids, they crave that absence. They crave it to be filled, and they will replace it with something. And what I'm praying is that it doesn't be filled with bicultural norms and what I call these artificial families or disillusioned families that may be friends of followers on social media. That can never replace the true family that you were born into.
Perfect. And I can't wait to get into that. You brought up so many wonderful points. Michael, same question.
That's good. When I think about family and community, family to me is where you call home. And, so often, right, our families get disrupted, whether it's, dealing with pain or trauma. We don't get to choose our parents, right? But we do get to choose how we're going to respond to what's been handed to us. Our community, right? Well, I love the African proverb, right? That says it takes a village to raise a child. So whether it's trauma or pain, or maybe you didn't grow up with your biological parents, but there were people in the community, right, who came alongside and saw a need and filled that need. And that's why, you particularly think about, in certain communities, we call each other brother or sister, particularly in church, right? Brother so and so. There was somebody maybe in that community who saw a child and there was a need. So maybe somebody who's listening, they are not connected with a biological parent. Maybe they were raised by a grandma or an auntie, and that became their family. Or somebody may have come from a foster situation or adopted. And the people who that they call home became that family. And even now with media, we can connect with people, right? And build out on that family, build out on that community. I think about Dr. King, who talked about, that beloved community, right? And it helped paint a picture of how we can be successful. And that often had times has to do with our mental, our physical, our emotional, and our spiritual health. And if we can focus on those areas and find coaches, mentors, leaders, teachers, like gentlemen on this call, right? We got folks in education, dealing with parenting. You, Michael, right? Using the media platform to get messages out. That all can be a part of that beloved community. Finding people who want to come alongside us and help us to be successful.
I think of how I do the group episodes of the podcast. Sometimes I do, like I mix men and women together. Sometimes I don't. For a conversation like this, I say, yeah, sure, I can get some women in here and they can talk about family and community. But I was looking for gentlemen that not only was in this line of work, but then also were from a culture that is struggling at some point sometimes when it comes to family. And I think of my own family. My father, he was raised by a single mom and he never knew his dad. Eventually, like when he was older, he knew about his father, but he gave himself the mindset of, you're dead to me. I don't want anything to do with you. And so my dad was a bad boy, always getting in fights, all in and out of jail, drinking and all this stuff, right? Still good, man. One of the things that resonate with me is that even though he was trying to figure out how to be a father and how to be a man, he was still as present as he could be, with that lifestyle that he was living. There was times when his mother would say, "Hey, you have to go be with your kids. You have to go, be a father for them." And then, he was starting to kind of, saying, "Okay, maybe I should, maybe I should." And then that was when he was becoming more active. And that wasn't until maybe we were around 7 to 9. We knew who he was, but it was either we would page him. So, back when pagers were a thing, so we would page him. He would always call us back religiously. And so we'll get a chance to talk to him. We would tell him if we had any accomplishments on our tests and things like that. We craved his attention. And our mom, she did her best, taking care of the household, working 2, 3 jobs. But even then, the only time I saw my mom was when she was sleeping. We were raised by our great grandmother, our aunt, our grandmothers. We didn't really get the typical, mom and dad growing up together in the house. We were separated. I look at the area where we grew up, it was a ghetto. It was bad. It was drugs. It was violence. It was all of these bad things happening. My mom would live in this house, by herself with us and, keeping up with the bills, the power, the water, stuff like that. So sometimes we didn't have it. But one of the things I think about that there was a shift that happened when my dad came back. Before my dad was in the household, we would get robbed quite a bit. People would break in our house, vandalize the home, tear up the sofas, break the TV still, the video games, everything, right? We always had to start fresh. It wasn't until my dad got, in the house and where people realized like, hey, we're not going to go to that house anymore, right? And he basically set the tone. And I remember one time, I don't know if this set the tone for me, but there's a guy who came in our backyard, right? It was a homeless guy. And he was just trying to get some bottles from the back, right? And my dad just kind of went out there. It was like what's going on? Because he had already talked to him out in the front yard saying, hey, we don't have anything, right? And then guy goes around the house, doesn't listen to my dad, and then my dad just kind of goes off on him, right? And I'm just there like looking at my dad, not angry or not anything. I'm just learning, right? And I'm like, is this who I need to be, right? Like do I have to have this level of fierceness, right? Because I think of the idea, and I know I talked to you about this, Michael, the idea of love and respect, right? Or fear and respect, where I respected my dad because he was a big guy, still is a big guy, right? With one finger, he could probably end my life. And so I feared it in a sense, but I respected him. And so whenever he walked, I was there, just following in his footsteps, the good and the bad. And then fast forward when I'm living off by myself and he was an alcoholic, I said, well, maybe I should, drink, a couple of beers, after I get home from work, or have some beers in the fridge for the weekend or something like that. And, I did some introspection, down the road a little bit. And I was like, this is not what I want. The family that I grew up in was broken by almost every means. But the family that I created was one where I was able to look at what my life was and to say, all right, I can see the good, I can see the bad. And I don't look at the bad saying, I wish I didn't have it. I'm happy that I had it so I can see it. I can say, hey, I see that bad. And I think sometimes people, they get caught up in the bad family members or in the bad moments of their communities or whatever it be, and they detest it. And they say that I don't want this in my life. And so what they do is they go down a road of maybe having their own family and not allowing their family to have those hardships, because my son will probably never have to deal with no lights in the house or no water in the house or people breaking in the house. Like he probably will never have to deal that. So then I think of, am I doing him a disservice by giving him a safe world to live in? And I think of like Dubai. Dubai is a very safe city. And there's men who are fathers, they would say, I wouldn't want my kids to live in Dubai because they are not going to be able to see the hardships of what family is. And we know that family can have ups and downs. It can have good moments and bad moments. And so when we look at the dynamic of what family is, the good and the bad, should people be looking at the good only, or should be looking at the the bad as something that can embellish them later on in life, and then to kind of pass the stories on, even in the stories of bad, and not be shy about them, right? To not, be so put off by what made them great, or what made them who they are today. And so I would love to, pass this to Michael to kind of start us off with, this idea of, the good and the bad of family, and should we look at it as a whole for just the good, the bad, or a blend of the two?
Michael, I appreciate you sharing some of your story. They're very transparent. A lot of, wow, so many nuggets there that you laid out. Uh, you talked about love, respect, and fear. I think in many ways our family can teach us what to do and what not to do. What's healthy, what's not healthy. Dad was good at this. He might not have been so good at that. And I liked how you shouted out your dad and you pointed out what he did do right, even though he might not have had it all together, even though he had challenges, even though he may have been substance abuse. It sounded like he had resilience and he kept fighting. And somebody listening may need to hear that, right? You might not have it all together, but you love your kids and you want to be involved in your children's life. Start somewhere. Terence talked about it, right? That craving for dad. And if there's barriers to entry, will you navigate that? Will you keep fighting? Because the children are watching the fight as well. It's interesting. Children will tell you that. They'll tell the adult parent that. Dad, did you fight for me? Well, your mom this or your dad that, or I didn't have no money. Did you navigate? How much fight did you have in you? So no, we're not doing a disservice by setting the stage for a better generation. Primarily, it's a good thing that your children won't have to worry about the lights not being on. I'm sure
Yeah.
they'll appreciate that, right?
Yeah.
So no, but I think there's one author who talked about the power of broke. There's a certain resilience and a toughness and a grit you get when you have to work for something. LeBron James' children might not grow up like he did, but they can still be hungry, right? There was a Cosby Show episode, I think, where Cosby said, "I'm rich, you're not," right? So we can still challenge our children to be better and not have a worse, stage of life for them. We work hard to position them, but still keep them hungry, still keep them ambitious. And your dad coming into the home did bring that sense of safety and security, right? You learned what it was like to have both sides. And that's your testimony. Our children's testimony might look different, but they're going to have their own set of challenges. Our job is not to have them reintroduce our problems to them, but to help them navigate theirs. And we can start from where we are. We can meet people where they are.
I was picturing myself and my sons after my divorce with my ex-wife. One thing I absolutely did not want to happen was not to be in my children's life. It's two boys, by the way, that I have. And so I did everything I could to have full custody, which I did. But after 2 days of thinking, I managed to put my, let's say, resentment aside and to see at what's good for my sons. They need the mother as much as they need me. So I took the decision to share the custody equally between me and the mother. But I was fully still involved in the life until today. And I dare to say that unfortunately, unfortunately or fortunately, in everything that happened that is negative in my life, I always look at the positive side. And that's something that's a mentality I have built over time, to look at the other side of any situation, especially if it's seemingly a negative situation. I'm going to see what can I gain from it that could be positive. So all that to say that the positive thing that happened after the divorce is that my bond with my children became so much stronger, because I could do the things that I always wanted to do with them as a man. which I did not have. I was not fully able to do with the mother. Mother is very protective, and for me, I wanted to do boy stuff with them, and also to develop the resilience for the life for the life ahead. For example, when my eldest son was 4 years old, we went to a supermarket where we usually go for shopping, and it's about half an hour walk from our home. So after the leaving the supermarket, I said to him, "Franz, you are going to walk us home. I'm going to follow you wherever you go. I will follow you. I will go with you, but it's you who will take me home." And he got scared a bit. And I explained to him the reason why I'm doing this is, let's say, for example, I faint right here. You're going to be scared. But if I know that you are able to get home, I will feel better. He set off. He kind of got lost a bit, and but then found his way back, and he made it. He made it to home, and he was very pleased, and so was I. And so that's one thing that I find really amazing with my son. And we made lots of movies. We wrote the script, and today they are 20 in their 20s. We have like loads of movies that we watch at Christmas time together. I mean, I couldn't be happier as a father. I would obviously have preferred it to be all of us together as a full unit. But if it's like that, and if it had to be like that, then so be it. But I managed to make the most of it. So the presence of a father, like Michael mentioned it, and you as well, both Michael, sorry, and is to me is it's paramount. I have seen in my childhood, which was in Haiti, how important the presence of the father is. I was lucky to have both my parents with me, 7 children altogether. We were um, we were raised like in the military. Really, we had to respect anyone, everyone. You would never dare to say a misplaced word to any stranger, random stranger. You would be you would be smacked by anyone. The community as well was there to help. So, well, some of the friends I had whose father was not present, that was a different story.
Awesome, man. I love the discussions and what's been shared. One of the things I would share is that family or parenting is not about perfection. It's about love. And love is about a commitment. And that commitment is one that we need to make as parents. And we need to rekindle what I call the very cornerstone of society, which is family. And as parents step up, whether father or mothers, to demonstrate that love that that child so desperately needs and will seek out. We as parents have an awesome privilege, but yet responsibility to invest in our kids, to serve our kids, to sacrifice for our kids, to love our kids, to be there for our kids. Sometimes it's just be accessible. Whether you're poor or rich, have a little, don't have much, we all can be loved in a way that is substantial. And it's like the late Frankie Beverly said, "There's joy in pain." There's joy and pain in life. I don't care where you come from, when you were born, where you were. There's joy and pain, and how do we lift those times of joy, but also realize those areas of pain and to grow from that. I mean, Michael, you grew, and we all grew out of some form of I call valley or pain, and we learned from that and we modified ourselves and our life and now you want a better life. Every parent wants a better life for their children than what they had. Our parents died for us to have a better life than what we had. So that's because there was a love and there was a commitment to family. And when I look at this, I think it's an awesome privilege to be a father, a husband, to be a grandfather, and to see, you know, I would just say when I look back on the lineage of Christ, you don't see a perfect family. I mean, you have look at that mixture for those who believe you don't see a perfect family, but what you do see is a lineage that can never be separated. It's a lineage that has roots. It's a lineage that has impacted your life, good, bad, or indifferent. And I don't think you can ever, whether you knew your father or mother or didn't know your father or mother, you can never detach from the lineage. Even if you don't know your mother or father, you can't detach. They have shaped you. They have shaped your DNA. They have shaped some of the ways that you function and think and so forth, and things that you crave. You'll never be able to distance yourself from your lineage. And so I would say, to the degree that you can learn the good, the bad, the indifference of who you are, and then your future, your presence and your future will shape who you become. But you can't change who you are and where you come from. That is a root that is strong. And so I would just say that family is not about perfection. It's about love. And we are to love one another. We are to love each other, and we are to love our children as Christ has loved us. And then you're born into a new family. If that's the side, if you become a believer, you're born into a new family, new citizen, a new father that's even greater than everything else. And so to get to know that father is beyond all measure. And I know sometimes we're in a society that don't want to talk about religion or things of that nature, but if you miss that piece, I believe Michael talked about there's drivers in a person's life. I think there's three primary drivers. There's a spiritual driver, there's an intellectual driver, and there's an emotion. I call it emotional or physical driver. If any of those drivers are off kilter, or intellectual is outpacing spiritual, or emotional is outpacing spiritual, your life is off kilter. It's difficult for you to love the way Christ loved. So we must have a driver that's led by a spiritual driver initially, followed by either an intellectual or physical driver. But without that, you're missing the core ingredient to a life that can love in the way that I'm speaking to. And so, we have this within us to love one another, especially those that we have been given the privilege to birth into this world. And so I want to encourage parents, I want to encourage mothers, dads, grandparents, etc., that family is so critical to who you are, that we are to take honor in serving as a parent, as a father, as a mother. Don't miss that opportunity, that joy. Of course, it's not meant to be easy, but it is meant to be joyous. And so I just want to encourage us. I believe that some of the challenges that we're facing in society today is because of the fragmented family. It's because of what we're seeing, where there's a separation and fathers are absent or mothers are absent. And we can work within that environment. Listen, single parents, I believe, is just some of the, I mean, you're talking about the strength and the backbone. I mean, whether you're a single mom or a single dad, I mean, they holding it all together. I mean, they're playing both roles. They're playing mother, they're playing father, they're playing everybody. The disciplinarian, or the breadwinner, whatever it is. I mean, I just take my head off to a single parent, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the nature of family is meant to be bonded and bonded with the deepest of love beyond ourselves. And we have a role to play as a father. We have a role to play as a mother. We have a role to play as a grandparent, as a sibling, and so forth. And I would say step into that role. Your life doesn't have to be perfect. I don't know of anyone's life that I know of that's perfect. If you could show me that person, I need to meet him. I need to meet him right away. Okay? Because I don't know any family, I don't know any person whose life is perfect. But I do know someone who has gone through the struggle and have come out better than what they were. And then they are to be a light to the next generation to move forward. What a privilege it is to be a parent.
Couple of things there. I do want to touch on a lot of things that everyone's been saying, all powerful. I think of, one of the things, my family is we are functionally dramatic. And so whenever we go somewhere on vacation, like we're going someplace, just like a family outing, there's always drama, right? There's something that happens, but it makes the trip so much more fun.
Memories.
I mean, if you know anything about me, I'm meticulous in my travel plans. Like everything is perfect. But then once I bring my family in the mix, no one knows what's going to happen. And I think of the rapper J. Cole. He has a line he says in one of the songs. He says there's beauty in the struggle.
Yes.
And there's ugliness in the success.
That's good.
And I go, that's so powerful, because how many people in life, they want just the good, right?
That's
They
right.
want the mansions
That's
and the cars. They want the happiness, the love. They want their wife or the husband to do exactly what they want all the time. But it doesn't happen that way all the
That's right.
time. And I couldn't imagine living a life that was pristine, So
Yep.
I love to have all these hiccups and things like that. And I remember when, my wife and I were like fiancés, and I was saying when I was going to like introduce her to the family, like, and she was going to get some time with them, like weeks or months at a time. I said, you're going to fall in love with them, because she's, dramatic sometimes too, but she just loves the drama. Like she craves it as much as I do, because we have a very simple life here in Texas. Like we're just by ourselves here. And so we know each other's day-to-day traits and everything. So, like we don't have to go into crazy cycles here, but it's always nice to, to get that reprieve and then to get that drama. And it's like, oh man, this is crazy. Like they forgot to get the toilet paper. It's the smallest things, right? But that could be family.
Well, Micah, that's what makes family, man. I hate to jump in.
Exactly.
That's what makes it so fun, right?
Yeah, but the question is now, how many people grow up resenting their family or not seeing what their family has done for them?
Yeah.
Because I can look at the kids, for example, in schools, when I was in schools, and how they would treat their parents or grandparents or whatever it be. And it's a sense of entitlement, where, not saying every student was like that, but the majority was. And so if we look at this trend of that happening, right, they won't appreciate the drama. Dad, you annoy me. Mom, you're not cool, right? Like, so they're giving themselves this mindset. And eventually, you know what happens and what is happening in our generation today? They will throw their parents in a nursing home before they throw them in their own guest room.
Michael, you talk about family and challenges of family. And I can imagine someone listening saying, that's not been my reality. Their reality may be geared more toward pain or trauma. And I think that's an important segue to talk about forgiveness. Forgiveness does not mean what they did was right. It's saying, I don't want to drink the poison of unforgiveness. And that's where that community and village can come in. The spiritual teaching, right, that says, if my mother and father forsakes me, the Lord will take me up. Because somebody may be listening and they're saying, I don't know my parent. Maybe they've been abused by a parent, and they had to form a new family. But it's hard to form a new family, right? Harboring unforgiveness. Forgiveness does not mean what they did was right. It's not saying we're given a free pass on the pain or the trauma. And that's why sometimes we need coaches, counselors, mentors, therapists, pastors, right? That village to help us navigate that pain or that difficulty or that trauma. So that way we're not passing down the pain to the next generation, right? And so I think it's so important to get help. Ask for help if you need help to navigate those emotions. I think about, it was mentioned earlier, not perfect. We're not perfect, but we can be present. And it's okay to say, let me start from where I am, because the pain of unforgiveness may be blocking me from my destiny.
I think of, after you say that, I think of like the the person that doesn't want to forgive, right? And what they do is very interesting. It happened to my cousin, and I know it's not just my cousin. It's a lot more people than just one person. Is that they will abandon the family. I haven't talked to my cousin in years. She left her mom, everything, her home foundation, and she found a community of people who are like-minded. And then that's where she is. Maybe today she considers them family. I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. But what we're seeing with the younger generation is that if they do forsake their family, they find a like-minded community.
Well, I love the point that Michael just made, is that heart of forgiveness. I mean, it's very difficult for us to humble ourselves and seek that forgiveness. Is not for them, it's for us. It's to cleanse us of all that stuff that's in us, right? And we're not designed for that. But people will either fight or flight. And it's easier to flight sometimes than to fight. And what if we begin to fight for what I call the non-negotiable? The non-negotiable of family, the cornerstone. I believe that a lot of the challenges we're facing today is because of the brokenness of the family. I think if we can begin to understand that we have a responsibility as parents to raise our kids with a certain set of experiences, and I call them more value, etc. That's a privilege. I don't want to flight from that. I want to fight for that. I want to fight for those things that I birthed into this world, that I've given life to. The other thing I say, I love, when you think about it, Mike, I love your story because it brought me to a story. I remember we used to have family Sunday dinners almost every weekend. It was a beautiful thing. Grandma would call us over the house. She cooked up, for 1,000 people, although there was just a few people. She didn't know how to cook for a few. And Pops, he's the barbecue king. He whipped up whatever on the barbecue, and we knew that. Hey, I had a couple of uncles. We just knew that given enough time in Chicago and its politics and everything else, given enough time, there was going to be some healthy debate. There was going to be some healthy discussion. And Pops and one of them was going to get into it. Pops was real quiet, but once she stepped on his toe a couple of too many times, he jump in, right?
Mhm.
And we just knew it, right? Even to this day, when I think about 30, 40 years ago, it's still funny to me. It's funny to see family, but then what would they do? They come back, hug each other, love it. Hey man, I love you. We can't just dismiss who we are and what family is about. You see, we can do that with strangers. We can do that with this community. We can just say, hey, you know what? We're going to flight from that. We'll never see you again. But it's more difficult to do that with our own family. Even if you didn't grow up with your parents, there's still something that's missing that you crave. Regardless of who your father or mother is, you crave them. And so I just wanna encourage us to fight and not flight for that in which I believe is special. Is something that I don't just dismiss it as community. I think a family is something special, and it's worth fighting for. It's worth forgiveness over. It's worth loving. And I just think if we can take that position. And finally, I think about who's having the greatest influence on our life. As a parent, have you abdicated that to someone else? Have you abdicated that to schools, camps, friends, community, social media, technology? Who's having the greatest influence on you and your child? And I just hope that although I know that my kids have multiple, mediums of influence, my prayer is that I would be influential in their life, that I would have some impact. You talked about with love and respect. We might be missing that now, that reverence for motherhood and fatherhood. Today, our young people, they marry around 28 years old. They're marrying a little later, but that is a cycle, actually. Sometime we go to that cycle of 28, sometime we go back to that cycle of 22. That's been a cycle, by the way, for the last century. But what happens is once we dismiss, I think we've lost the reverence for marriage. And I want to encourage us not to lose that reverence, not to lose that, because it is a core of who we are, guys. I mean, we're not born to have to function that way as a family. We're born as a family to function as with a husband and a wife and children. Now, of course, things don't operate like that today in a large percentage, but that's also where you'll find some great pain. That's when you keep these other guys busy on the couch and you keep that treatment going with anxiety and depression, which is all-time high, because they're missing a core of who they are. So let's fight for this, what I call non-negotiable. As parents, it's a special privilege and honor to raise children. If you father them, raise them.
So talking about the influence that we have or we're supposed to have on our children, I was shocked when my son one day sent me a link to go on YouTube for music. So I clicked on it, and what was it? That was a music by Stevie Wonder. So what? He's listening to Stevie Wonder now? And then the next day, a link of music by Bob Marley, another one by Haitian band. Wow. I was shocked to point, but shocked positively, because whenever we are in the car, I would put those music, those my soul music, my funk music, and salsa or Haitian compa, etc. And whenever he had him or his little brother had the opportunity to change the music and put the radio on, to listen to the pop music, they would take that chance and put it. So I would never suspect them to listen to, let alone to share with me those music that I used to make them listen to in our childhood. And now that's the only thing they listen to, all those classic music and films that I used to watch um, when I was when they were younger. They were not into those films at all. Now that's what they're watching. The, I mean, we as parents, we have a lot of influence on our children, more than we want to believe that we do. Whatever we do with our children, we should always endeavor to instill positivity on them, because take they will take it somehow, and at some point they will reproduce it in the future. And then to add to what Michael T. Brown said about the forgiveness earlier, in the early days after my separation with my ex-wife, her new boyfriend was living with her. So when I go to pick up my sons or to take her take them to their mom, he was always there, and my sons could sense that I was not happy, right, to see another man being in the house where my children are living. So after a couple of months, I took my sons to their mom. The boyfriend was outside. I walked to him, and I could see in the corner of my eye my little boy, my youngest son, looking like he's expecting some fight to go on. As I got to the boyfriend, I gave him a hand, and I shook hands with him. I said, "Good luck. Let's, you living under the same roof as my children, and they have not told me anything negative about you. So thank you for being good to them, and that's life." And that guy, he shed tears in front of me. I was not expecting that, and my son witnessed this, and to me that was a great example. I was not expecting it to be an example. I just did it because I wanted to get that over and move on. But then, yeah, I realized that was actually a very powerful example of forgiveness to show um, my sons. So forgiveness is as important because they were now part of his family, whether I wanted it or not, and uh, and he's been good to them.
Renee, I appreciate you sharing that example because it shows how, right, our children are watching us. They're watching us in how we handle adversity when things don't go well. And sometimes one of the greatest things we can teach our children, right, is how we recover when we mess up. I heard it put this way, don't show me your stars until you show me your scars. Sometimes we want to, sugarcoat our own experiences to maybe make our example look good. When oftentimes what our children need is our testimonies of when we didn't handle things well. When we apologize to them, son, daughter, maybe I mishandled you in this moment, or I didn't behave the best on the road there, right? Whatever it is that they see in us, because sometimes I think there's a gap. And Michael and we talked about this when we met, when we in our conversation, right? Sometimes the gap that exists between generations. Who's going to close the gap? Sometimes we speak about our youth as if we're not parenting them. Okay. I started as a school counselor. So I started by hearing what the children had to say about what was going on in their life and in their reality. And oftentimes, they're going to shoot straight. This is how my dad was with me. This is how my mom was with me. This is how my stepdad was. Renee just gave a great example there, right? He shouted him out for being a good influence in the home. And I point to the scripture that, in Malachi, it talks about he will turn the hearts of fathers back to their children and the hearts of the children back to their fathers, so that I will not come and strike the land with complete destruction. When we turn our hearts to our children, Terence talked about it, right? The fight. Some things are worth fighting for. And again, I come back to that point. Maybe we haven't dotted every I and crossed every T. But if you got children out there, find them, but they might find you. And you ought to be able to say, right? I just can't show you my stars, but I can show you my scars. Renee's example of the music, that when we expose children to certain things, they're going to pick up on it. So that's a good question as parents, right? To constantly look at, what am I presenting in front of them that they're going to pick up on? One of the great ways to do that is through servant leadership, right? The greatest among you shall be your servant. And not everybody's going to have their name put up in lights, right? I think about the people who came before us, our great grandparents, those who didn't have platforms like we're on now, who made sacrifices so that we can have a platform like this to say, let's make the generations better. So we might not have our name written in a bulletin board, but that mom who's out there, you're writing your name on the heart of that child. You may raise up a child that may raise up 1,000,000. The legacy, the impact that we make, starting in the home with those around us, can go so far.
One of the reasons why I started the podcast, the first reason was I wanted a legacy, right? For if anything happened to me, for my son to be able to hear me or see me or to learn from me still, because we don't have that in our world today. Like if your father didn't do a podcast, or if he didn't write books, or if he wasn't open about his emotions, and the generation of men before us, or maybe just at least me, they didn't talk about their emotions, right? Men, like rub dirt on it. Don't talk about what's going on in your life. Handle it, right? Deal with it. Here is a platform to not only talk through or what has happened in your life, but to give yourself a mindset that there's another option, right? There is always the alternative. So if things are not going good now, you can make some changes. But this is not just for my son. This is for all the young men too, who may not have fathers, right? I got 3 great men in this room with me, right? All of you are great role models and examples for young men. especially young black men, right? Maybe that are growing up in the ghetto or, with a broken household or something along those lines. And maybe they're looking at their community for, how to get their affection, right? We can look at what happens with, gangbangers or something like that, right? There's a guy on the corner who has some jewelry and some money and will put that in someone's pocket. And then now they're like, okay, this is nice, right? Because I didn't have anything before. And so that little enticement can turn someone saying, you know what, I'm going to, stay with these groups of individuals, even though we can look at the statistics, because you can go to Google and look at it and say, is this a good choice? Is this something that we should be looking at? And if it's not, then we need to figure out what would be the better alternative. And so I was like, let me create coaching in session. Like, let me create a podcast where people can they can get what they need. They don't have to listen to every episode. They just take what they need. Coaching in a session is a buffet. We have 600 episodes today. You can literally go into any search of any of our podcast stations, even YouTube, type in what you need, and you're going to get exactly that. And so we talk about so many topics. It's just a wide breadth in what life is. And family, I believe, is the most important part. And I think of marriage because I know Terence brought it up. When I wanted to get married, I wanted to make sure that the person that I was going to marry was going to be someone I wouldn't be adverse to having a family with, beginning a family with. And I think of my time before marriage. I was going on dates 4 times a week. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, different girls too. It's not the same girl. So
that can get pretty expensive, Michael.
It was terrible. It was terrible. And then I was like, what's going on, with these women? I just wasn't finding the click for family. Then I finally found someone, and it's funny. Like, I tell people on the podcast, especially young men that I speak with, how to find the woman, because they're always asking me about kids and stuff like that. I tell them this. I said, it's easy to have a child with a woman. It's more difficult to have a child with the right woman. They're like, oh, that makes sense. And then they're like, how do you know you found the right woman? I say, the woman that you ultimately find is a woman that will appreciate everything that you are and everything that you have become. Someone that seems so familiar to you that you might have said, like, how do you know this much about me, right? It's someone who paid attention, like looks at you. And I believe that's what family is, right? Family can look at you so much better than the community can look at you, right? Because my followers can maybe see something I do, and maybe I say something negative one day. I can lose hundreds, if not thousands of followers on any respective platform. And they can say, oh, well, Michael said something crazy. Look what happened with the whole Snow White debacle when she was talking about Palestine, right? Millions of dollars in revenue lost for Disney just because of an opinion, right? So communities can be very, quick to throw you to the side. But I'm sure her family's not going to say, sweetheart, you were talking about this, you're disowned, you can't come to Thanksgiving. I'm sure they're not saying that to her. But yet it seems like that is so vivid. As we begin to wrap up, of course, we're going to get some final thoughts and everything, but the idea of family being the legacy, right? Family being that long-term thing we should be looking at, because if we ask anyone, can you name your great-grandfather? They probably can't. And so, some ideas of how we can keep on with the legacy. I know I have the podcast here, but if you have any other ideas of how people can, remain intact to their family and their history.
No, that's great. And I love your story, those teachable moments. And I'll quickly comment when you talk about finding that perfect mate, just finding a perfect relationship, period. Think about the age and stage of our kids. When they're young, we want to love them, show them as much affection as you can, 0 to 5. Just love them to death, spoil them, whatever, it's fine. When they get to about 6 to 10, they need affirmation. They need to understand purpose. A lot of our kids may not understand they have a purpose in life, and affirm that, keep affirming that you mean something, you have a purpose and so forth. When they get to about 10 to 15, they're starting to express themselves, right? And they're searching for community. They're looking for fun or joy or whatever. They're looking to establish their own little personality and everything. And as they get a little older, they want that independence, although they can't be. But we all think we're independent. They don't want to be like your father Chevrolet. They want to be different. Even if they love their father Chevrolet, they still want to be a little different. They don't want to be like mom and dad. They want you to drop them off around the corner and be a little different, right? When they're coming to their own person. Think about those attributes of love, affirmation, and all of that. That's what we crave. But one of the things I would say, and we teach parents to do this, I think is very critical. I don't want your story to die with you. One of the things that our ancestors did, they told the story. Back then, our great grandmothers and so forth, they probably they didn't have birth certificates. They didn't have the things that you and I have today because they were not allowed to have that. They weren't citizens, if you will. But they told the story and they kept the lineage in the family by telling stories for generations. And we're to tell the story. And I try to encourage parents to write that story down. It's a great story. Their life was a great book. Back in the day, we used to videotape it on VHS, and you young folks probably saying, "What's a VHS?" But we used to put it on that VHS, and we used to hear the stories of our parents, our grandparents, and so forth. Now you can put it on digital, right? And it never dies. That story lives on. Write a book about it. Write a small 2-3 pages. When I pass away, my kids will, open their will, their trust, and so forth. The first thing they're going to receive, other than that $5 check, the first thing they're going to receive is a love letter and a story telling them how much I love them, care for them, how special they are. And what I want to encourage them to carry the lineage forward, to carry the story forward in their life and their family. I want them to live a life worthy of his calling. And then they'll get, whatever $2 I have left and, all that stuff. But I want them to hear about the story. And then in there as well are the stories of their grandparents, their great-grandparents. We were able to go back to 1812, and so that's their great-grandparents, and tell their stories. Looking at the archives and saying, look at your grandfather who valued education, who went back to school, and instead of getting his GED, he sat in some type of accelerated program in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, all the way to high school, and walked across the stage at 50-some years old to get his diploma, his high school diploma. He didn't need that high school diploma. He worked for one of the largest airlines in the country. He had become the senior engineer for an airline company with a 2nd grade education, but yet he had to go back and get a high school diploma in order to get a job. And he sat in the classroom. See, that's valuing education, right? What do we value? And what is not a greater value than our family? There's nothing else we should value more than our family. It's not jobs, because you can't take those with you. It's not the money. It's not the big house. It's not the big car. It's not the podcast that you got 1 million followers. What you're going to be remembered for is the souls that you have touched. It's the souls that you have impacted. It's the souls that you have influenced. And I think about it, I'm a little bit closer to the other side than you guys are. But I think about it, the greatest legacy I can leave for me as a father, I'm not saying it's for everybody, just for me, is that my children will know who Christ is and what he's done. It's the greatest legacy I can leave. And he says for me to train and instruct them into who he is. That's Ephesians 6:4. And so that's the greatest legacy I can leave as a dad, as a husband, as a father, as a grandfather, so that generations upon generations will know who he is and what he's done. And that Pops walked alongside of Christ and has righteousness and will be together. We'll be together for eternity.
Really good. I think a spiritual legacy is important. And one way to keep the legacy going, the impact going, is by the lives we live now. To think about how we define success. To miss success is to miss our purpose. To miss our purpose, right, is to miss what true success is. So as a parent, what am I doing in the big three categories for our mental, our physical, and our spiritual health? Are we teaching our children by what we do and by how we live? When someone say, I can't leave a perfect example, that's okay. We can leave an imperfect example, but they can see the grit, the fight, the determination in us. Having family meetings, having a safe space for children to be able to talk helps keep legacy going. The storytelling helps keep legacy going. Family reunions, if all possible, right? Get togethers, cookouts, outings, anything right that supports the family. Church. Church is a great place, right? To connect with others, to connect our families to others. Statistics show that young people are leaving the faith more now than ever. That's the tough news. The good news is that there's an opportunity there. There's an opportunity to not just, well, I heard it put this way. The best sermon you can hear oftentimes, right? Not what's said, but what's shown. It's better to see a sermon than hear a sermon every day, right? Get the opportunity to live an example in these areas and to help teach and train the next generation. And there's a great opportunity there. There's a great opportunity to heal, to forgive, and to do our part. Just to stand up and do our part in whatever way we can, right? To teach, instill, and inspire the next generation. That's what I would impart.
Jump on what Michael said. Within that toughness of seeing youngsters leaving the church, leaving families, there is opportunity. So you are focusing on the positive side of things, which I mentioned earlier as well. For me, I try to do things for my sons to see. Ever since that day, I noticed how my youngest child reacted to the way I behaved to the stepfather. So I regularly meet up with my family in France, and I take them with me, even though they are older now. They gladly go with me, meeting the other cousins for our annual barbecue session in Paris. It's something that they value, and they see how well we are bonded as a family, because all my cousins who are in the same generation as me meet at that time with their own children, and everyone having fun, singing, playing dominoes, music, and all the children are playing together. Some of them meet for the first time, but it's as if they had known each other for forever. So for me, that's where the family side blends with the spirit of community, because it's a large family. So that's the kind of thing, the legacy I want to leave behind. And I love it when my sons are reminiscing those moments, either with me or between themselves. Oh, you remember when we went to so and so? Well, oh, remember when we did that thing with daddy? And we're laughing. It's for me, that's great. When I hear that, I feel like I have achieved my purpose as a father. There's nothing that means more for me.
Yeah, there's just so much to be said when it comes to legacy. And we do things, I think, almost instinctually, whether it be with faith or writing books or starting a podcast or being a teacher and just impacting one student's life at a time. And we might not see it as like a significant factor in someone's life because we're just moving through our life so quickly. Because we might be worried about something, worried about our own family, or worried about our community or our bills, or something that has gone wrong in our life. And it's easy to get distracted in our world today, especially since it's so busy. We have all of these wonderful technologies. This podcast, for example, our cell phones, another. We can join all of these TikToks and Twitters and X's, whatever you want to, consider these social medias, and we can find like-minded individuals and we can say this feels like home. But home is going to be exactly where you put your mind and where you put your faith in. Because I always say when you go on vacation, you have your hotel room and you might feel stressed when you're out around all these people. But when you go back to that hotel room, it feels nice. But then when you get on the plane, you go back home, it feels even nicer. Imagine if you surrounded yourself with family when you got back home like that. And you just said, okay, this is what home is. And I encourage people to figure out what home is for you. And then from there, surround yourself with family that you can say is blood. And maybe some people, they don't have that option. Of course, you did have that option at one point, right? Maybe today you're adopted, you don't know where you came from. You can build, right? You can start a family, right? I know some people, they say, when they start fresh, they say, okay, I'm going to get a spouse, a partner, and I'm going to start a family, right? And I'm going to be present. I'm going to be that father. I'm going to be that mother. I'm going to be that wife or that husband that I know my kids need, right? And today's a conversation where it can spark some interest in your own family, can spark some interest in who you're hanging around with, because you are the proponent of the people you surround yourself with. Get clear on that, right? Are they bringing about your best interest? And it's easy to, have people like you for your accolades today. And then once everything is gone, have them abandon you because you are a former fraction of, what you were. But family is going to be one of those things. It doesn't matter if you have $1 billion or if you have a nickel, as long as you have each other, right? I think of people who are on the streets, right? They have each other. That's enough for them, right? Of course, they might think of days when they can, be in a home and be warm or cool, depending on where you live, but they have each other for hope. And that right there is going to give them, so much more belief that things can change rather than just, looking at the world and being so, that is so convoluted with what people are living in. Because again, I can go on Instagram and see all these people who are happy and smiling. And the moment you really get to know them, they're not even, that person, right? It's all a facade. So we have to find some realness in there. And so as we begin to wrap up, I encourage people to not only find the realness, but to, look more into what these gentlemen have done. I'm also going to be pointing out all of their episodes. So all their episodes will be right down below. So you can watch their individual episodes and you will find that the conversation is going to be talking about this idea, mindset, family, what to do, all of these different things also, but to say the least, right? Because, Renes, you didn't talk about your book, you didn't talk about your teaching, your music, all the kids you impact. You've done so much, right? But again, we are going to pair that with our episodes that we have already recorded. And so I encourage people to look at those episodes as well. But as we go, we're going to just kind of go around the room, get some final thoughts, and then please tell everyone where they can find you, best social medias, emails, whatever you want to give anyone if they want to reach out to you, if they resonated with what you said and they want to maybe look at the next steps. So we'll begin with Renes, then we'll go Michael, and then Terence to finish up.
First of all, thank you for the invitation. That was a nice surprise. I was not expecting this at all, and it's a pleasure to meet you, Michael Brown, and Terence as well, and to share this moment with you. So yeah, people can find me on Instagram, Facebook, or just by typing my name on Google search, Renes Lophanor, and that will lead you to my website. And for anyone who fancy sending me a line to find out about my book or about my teaching or anything else that I do, you can send me an email at renes@reneslophanor.com.
Excellent. Yeah, I can be found on Twitter, formerly known as X, at mtbrown98. My website, brownsleadership.com. I do speaking engagements as well. And or if people want to contact me directly, they can reach me at email at brownsleadership.com. And yeah, look forward to connecting with your audience and being of help as we can. And Michael, thank you for sharing this platform, fellow guests. Nice connecting with you and sharing these topics. My closing thought would be to point back to purpose, right? God created family for a purpose, right? To give us that grounding, that security, that love, that support, that energy to help us flourish, to ultimately point back to Him to please Him. So, for those who may be struggling with this idea of family, it might not be resonating with you because we know, right? Family can be difficult. I call family the gymnasium, right? That helps us learn about relationships. And sometimes that gymnasium can be pretty tough and pretty intense. But there's people alongside who may be able to help coach you, to help challenge you, to help just give you a safe space to share what you're going through. So I encourage folks to find the purpose, their own personal purpose, but also their purpose within their families because the need is so great. And again, thank you for sharing this platform.
Yeah, Michael, I echo that, and just what an honor it is to come on with you, brother, and just hear the stories of these great guys, and hear your story. I love that idea around purpose, and I think it's spot on. I think it was Mark Twain that said there's two great days in life: the day that you were born, and then the second day is when you find out why you were born, what your purpose is in life. And every day we write a chapter in our life. And the question is what's going to be the ending? None of us know the end date of our life. And so every day, just write another chapter. Every day, and you write that chapter, not necessarily by physically writing it, just how you live and how you love, how you care for people. I know my kids, out of all the things I've done, they don't care about any of that. They don't even know what it is. I mean, I'm like, what about that time I was leading, $30 billion for Coca-Cola? They don't care. They don't even know about it. You know what they care about? They care about, hey, Dad was hanging out with him at the ballpark, or Dad did this, and Dad bought him an ice cream cone. Stuff that I don't think about that is important, is so important to them. Is more important to them than anything I've ever done. And so, as a person says, they want to know not how much you know, but how much you care. And they want to know that you care for them and love them. And so you can find us at our website, victoriousfamily.org. And of course, we're on all the social media. And we just want to see strong, healthy, flourishing families. And I'm not ready to accept that we should give up on what we believe is the traditional family. And that is a husband and a wife and child. And in any form, we have a responsibility. But I believe it's a great honor and privilege to raise kids, especially if we can raise them not by perfection, but with love. The same love that the Father demonstrated to us. It's a love, as my brother said, of forgiveness. It's a love of just great caring. It's a love where we're accessible, we're available. It's a love that we're speaking into their life every day. So just love. People say, well, what's the secret sauce? Love well. Parents, whatever just love well. And it'll all be fine.
And as I said earlier, all their links and all their socials will be right down below. And I encourage everyone to just send them an email, just a contact, and just have a conversation, right? Maybe something's going on in your family, or maybe they said something and it resonated with you because you had a similar situation. Get a good understanding of what people are capable of, and people are meant to work together. I know we live in this world where we feel like we can do everything by ourselves, but I bring this up all the time, and it's so true. You go to the grocery store, you didn't grow those, produce, or you didn't box those macaroni and cheeses, right? But yet you eat them like you own them, right? Because you bought them, because you trade some time for some money. But yet, all the things that are around us, the homes that you're living in, the roads that you drive on, is because of people. And so we do have to get back to being human again. Again, technology is a great thing, but we need to find connection. And I believe the first place we should find connection is within our families. Depending on where you are right now, it might seem or be dire, but there's always going to be a way out if you give yourself that mindset. So I do want to thank you, gentlemen, for coming on, spending some time, again, talking about your work, and then joining me on this conversation of family and community today.
Thank you.
Thank you.